If you think you're perfect, invincible, or that you can do absolutely anything without fault, you're setting yourself up for a trap. That kind of thinking doesn't push you forward, it holds you back. It becomes a barrier between you and your goals. What's most likely to sink or destroy you isn't out there in the world. It's inside you. It's you. And it's that relentless, blinding force called ego. I remember when I was the director of marketing at American Apparel. Back then, it was one of the fastest growing and largest fashion companies on the planet. They had 12,000 employees and stores in 20 countries, including some beautiful flagship stores right here in Australia. They were producing tens of millions of garments every year, raking in nearly $1 billion in sales. I was working on my book while watching that company implode, literally tearing itself apart. And, as it turns out, Dov Charney, the founder of American Apparel, fell victim to exactly what I'm talking about. Here's the thing. Whenever you take on something hard, something ambitious, you inevitably meet people who tell you it won't work. They say it's too risky, too difficult, or simply, not how things go. But by the very nature of success, you prove those critics wrong as you push forward. If everyone always listened to the naysayers and so-called realists, we'd never see progress. Nothing new would ever come to life. To succeed, you must, by definition, defy the odds and silence the doubters. But here's the catch, a dangerous lesson many entrepreneurs, creatives, and successful people learn along the way is this: they stop listening to anyone who questions them. Doubters become haters, and those who try to guide or advise are dismissed as obstacles. Sometimes, these obstacles are actually the voices trying to save you from stepping off a cliff. This was exactly what happened at American Apparel. You can imagine how messy it got. Take another example. Elon Musk. When he decided to take his fortune from the internet and launch a space company, SpaceX, his friends actually staged an intervention, Alcoholics Anonymous style. They warned him, "You can't do this. It's a terrible idea. You'll lose everything." Of course, he didn't listen. Instead, he built a multi-billion-dollar space empire. And when he spent $40 billion to buy Twitter, a move everyone said was doomed to fail and blow up in his face, why would he pay attention? He's heard that criticism his entire life. What ego does is make it incredibly difficult to separate good advice from bad, truth from fiction. It stands between you and your goals, clouding your judgment. Interestingly, that's how Alcoholics Anonymous defines ego: a conscious separation from reality, from other people, from objective truth, and from how things truly happened. Ego inflates, puffs up, and misleads. It's that voice inside that convinces you that you're always right, that you know better, and that no one else understands. It's that persistent voice whispering in your mind. They don't know what they're talking about. You're a genius. You were right last time. It's going to be like this always. This time is different. That relentless inner voice. The one that sneaks in when you least expect it. And here's the truth. As Sarah Connolly once said, ego drags us down just like gravity pulls us to the ground. Why? Because sometimes they're right and we're wrong. Ego blurs the line, making it painfully difficult to tell the difference. I saw this play out in real time at American Apparel. When people advised Dov Charney, "You need to hire competent operators to help run this enormous company," he saw those very operators as threats to his control. Maybe that's why a 21-year-old was running marketing at a company of that scale. Looking back, it was clearly a recipe for disaster. And when regulators told him, "You can't have relationships with your employees, That's illegal. His response was, "Who are you to tell me what to do?" Unsurprisingly, that attitude landed him in serious trouble. Ego convinces us that rules don't apply to us. It whispers that we're better than everyone else, that we always know best, and that anyone trying to hold us back is just in the way. Watching this unfold was both terrifying and eye-opening. But, honestly, one of the reasons I didn't quit that job was because the Stoics remind us not to be just pen and ink philosophers, people who only write and think endlessly. Instead, they teach us to live fully, to engage with the world, meet real people, and experience life firsthand, so we can connect theory to the messy realities of living. It was a lucky, if painful, opportunity. Watching it all unravel was heartbreaking and difficult, but also deeply revealing. It shaped the core of the book I was writing. I remember while working on it, I visited an NFL coach who'd read Obstacle. He asked, "What are you working on?" I told him I was thinking about a book on humility, still in the early stages. He responded, "That's interesting. Ego is the cancer of my profession." That hit me hard. Ego is the cancer of my profession. Too. It's the cancer of yours. In fact, it's a plague on every profession and, really, on the world. The biggest obstacle you face isn't out there in the economy, regulations, or your competitors. Know what's most likely to sink or destroy you is within. It is you, and it's that ego. So, how do we keep ego at bay? What can we do about it? Since writing ego is the enemy, the two most common questions I've received are: first, people say, "Of course ego is bad. I know that. My boss has a huge ego. What can I do about it?" But rarely do they say, "I have a huge ego. I need help with it." And that's the very definition of ego. We can easily spot it in others but convince ourselves we're special, better, and somehow exempt. Of course, everyone has an ego. It's part of being human. But it's always easier to see the flaws in others, to point fingers, than to face ourselves honestly and deal with our own issues. The second question I often hear is this: sure, ego can be bad, but don't you actually need a little bit of it? Isn't some ego necessary? This is something I probably didn't explore deeply enough in the book. Looking back, if I were to write another version, I'd dedicate more time to this idea. Because, of course, there's a big difference between ego and confidence. Think of it as a spectrum. On one end, there's ego, the kind you immediately recognize and tend to dislike. It's the ego that holds people back, that blinds them to their flaws and drags them down. On the other end of the spectrum, you have imposter syndrome or crushing self-doubt, the feeling that the world is rigged against you, that success is impossible. Surprisingly, this too is a form of ego. It's just ego turned inward. A hyper-focus on the self that convinces you that you're destined to fail. And sitting somewhere right in the middle? That's confidence, the Aristotelian golden mean. The perfect balance between these two extremes. One of the oldest, most powerful stories we have perfectly captures this tension: the story of David and Goliath. This isn't just a tale of big versus small. It's a story about confidence versus ego. Goliath, a giant and a fierce warrior, issues his famous challenge during the war against the Israelites. "Let's settle this man to man. Whoever defeats me will be the victor." But for 40 days, no one steps up. That silence? It's not bravery. It's fear, cowardice. You simply can't have that in battle. Then enters David, a young shepherd boy visiting his brothers in the army. He hears Goliath's challenge and asks himself, "Why not me? Maybe I'll try." His brothers laugh. But David is brave enough to believe in himself. He says, "I'm just a shepherd, not a soldier. But it's not easy being a shepherd. I'm out there alone, facing bears and wolves, battling the elements every day. I think I can do this." As a joke, they suit him up in a soldier's armor. But he quickly realizes it won't work. He's too small and can't bear the heavy weight. So, he takes it off and gets creative. He grabs his sling, fetches some stones from a nearby stream, and steps up to challenge Goliath. Goliath laughs at him, which, as fate would have it, is the last thing he ever does. One of those stones flies from the sling at incredible speed and strikes Goliath down. And here's the part they often skip when telling the story to kids. After felling Goliath, David cuts off his head with Goliath's own sword. In the famous Caravaggio painting, David holds Goliath's head high, the head almost bigger than his entire body. The sword he wields bears the Latin inscription HCS, standing for humility conquers pride. David's story is a timeless lesson in confidence tempered by humility, showing us that true strength comes not from ego, but from knowing oneself deeply. What David possessed was not just confidence, but a deep self-awareness. He believed he could face Goliath, but he also understood his limits. He knew there were certain ways he couldn't fight, and he was fully aware he wasn't as physically strong as the giant before him. Goliath, on the other hand, was ruled by ego, a blinding belief that he was invincible, unbeatable, and beyond reproach. Because of this, he was completely oblivious to his own weaknesses and vulnerabilities. This is why ego is so dangerous. But it's not just dangerous because it blinds us, it's also because ego is easily outmatched by someone who possesses humility and self-awareness. David was able to harness his own strengths against Goliath's fatal flaws, and that kind of self-awareness is the key. Think about it. If you believe you're perfect, if you think you're invincible, if you feel you can do anything without fault, you become stuck, your ego traps you, and progress grinds to a halt. One of my favorite quotes from Epictetus perfectly captures this. Remember, it's impossible to learn that which you think you already know. In a less violent arena than the battlefield, we see what ego does when it convinces you that you're God's gift. When it insists you're flawless and know everything. And in a way, ego is right, because when you believe that, you close the door to growth. You can't prove otherwise. So you stop improving, stop evolving. Socrates, by contrast, embodied humility. He knew what he didn't know and was always eager to ask questions. Through this curiosity, he kept growing and learning throughout his life. Ego, then, is our greatest impediment. It blocks us from change, from learning, from adapting. It stops us from gaining the kind of confidence that comes from recognizing what we don't know, what we need to improve, and where our weaknesses lie. This is the mindset we're cultivating here. Ego is sneaky. It creeps in quietly, finds a way to take hold. And it's not something you defeat once and for all. Instead, it's something you must constantly watch for and guard against. And so, Stoicism itself begins on a porch. That's the meaning behind the word Stoicism. Stoa means porch, the Stoa poikil, or painted porch in ancient Athens where the Stoic philosophy was born. Picture the Stoics sitting there, sharing ideas, debating life, and guiding each other through wisdom. And that's exactly what I'm bringing to you. I'm taking this Stoic show on the road this summer and fall. I'll be at the Troxy Theatre in London on Tuesday, November 12th. Then at the Rotterdam AOY in the Netherlands on November 13th, followed by the Convention Centre in Dublin on November 15th. On November 18th, Catch me at the Center for Performing Arts in Vancouver. Then, I'll be live at the Elgin Theatre in Toronto on November 20th, 2024. We'll be diving deep into Stoicism, philosophy, and I'll share insights from my books, plus answer your questions live. I'm genuinely excited. This is my first world tour like this, and I can't wait to connect with all of you. I'll see you there. We'd love to have you join our growing community at the SOTIC journey.